2011 was a shocking year for NBA fans. The league was flipped upside down when one of the game's most legendary stars abandoned his hometown team to dominate for a decade. The only thing that stood in his way was a group of old players hungry to prove the critics wrong. Let's get into it. Summer of 2010 was headlined by one famous line.
In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat.
When LeBron announced his decision on ESPN, the world was angry. Jerseys were being burned on the streets of Cleveland. The fear was that a roster consisting of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh was too good to beat. The NBA wouldn't even be fun to watch anymore. Everyone thought that LeBron would cruise to championships so easily that it would taint history. How could he ever compare to Michael Jordan, who remained loyal to Chicago by joining a super team in Miami? When asked at the first press conference how many championships they'd win, he claimed,
"Not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7.
LeBron was confident that this would be the right move to cement his legacy as the greatest player of all time. Meanwhile, the Mavericks were rostering a group of players who used to be really good. Nobody expected much of the Mavericks though. They were perennial losers. They had their chance to win in 2006 when they blew a 2-0 series lead in the finals against Dwayne Wade and the Miami Heat. The next year, after finishing the regular season with the NBA's best record, they got embarrassed in the first round by the 8th-seeded Warriors. The belief was that they had gone stale. The Mavericks star player, Dirk Nowitzki, was criticized about as much as any superstar in NBA history. He was too slow, too white, too European, not clutch, not a leader, just not made of the right stuff. At this point, he had heard it all. The expectation was that he would go down in the books as one of the greatest players that wasn't made of championship DNA. Nowitzki was surrounded by a bunch of players that had never quite been able to win it when it mattered either. Jason Kidd, one of the all-time greatest point guards, had lost both his opportunities in the NBA Finals when he played for New Jersey, and was now well past his prime at 37 years old. Sean Marion was a 4-time All-Star that spent years on a Phoenix Suns team that had a historically good offense, but never got past the conference finals. He was now 32 years old and significantly less productive. Peja Stojakovic was a former 3-time All-Star for the Kings that lost in overtime against the Lakers in Game 7 of the 2002 Conference Finals. And Jason Terry had spent years as Nowitzki's sidekick, losing in Dallas. A former 6th Man of the Year that was most famous for being the disappointing replacement that the Mavericks acquired when they lost 2-time MVP Steve Nash to free agency. Even though the odds seemed to be stacked against them, the players had as much confidence as ever. Jason Terry looked at his teammates and was convinced that they were good enough to win the championship. He was so certain that he got a picture of the Larry O'Brien trophy tattooed on his arm before the season even started. At the time, everyone thought that was insane. In retrospect, he may have been a genius. Players were making sacrifices and adjusting their games for the betterment of the team. They played with extreme efficiency, selflessness, and intelligence. Their head coach, Rick Carlisle, was squeezing the most out of all his players. All-star appearances and stat padding were no longer on the agenda for the Mavs. All that mattered was winning before the clock struck midnight on their NBA playing careers. They entered the playoffs as a non-threatening 3rd seed. They were expected to bow out early as usual. After beating Portland in the first round, the Mavs got their first real playoff test against Kobe Bryant and the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers were back-to-back champions at the time, looking to three-peat for the 2nd time in the same decade. Mamba was the winningest player in the entire league. The Mavs had other plans. Nowitzki played the best basketball of his entire career. He was scoring like a man possessed. Check out his stats. 25.3 points per game with a .574 field goal percentage, a .727 three-point percentage, and shot .938 from free throw line. Jason Terry, Stojakovic, and Nowitzki combined to go 32 for 51 from 3. Everything was just clicking for Dallas on both sides of the floor. Most importantly, this was a different looking Dirk. He was fierce, angry, and cold as ice. The Mavs completely outmatched the Lakers and swept them in 4 games. Following the series, the team started getting their first bit of credit. Fans started raving about the veteran depth that Dallas had this season. The Heat, however, were getting the Dragons' share of the press. They just stomped on the reigning kings of the East, the Boston Celtics. Miami was in playoff form, and it was full throttle domination over their opponents. They were freakishly athletic. Every second play seemed to be a ridiculous alley-oop between Wade and LeBron, followed by an emphatic chest pumping and showboating. Odds were skewed heavily in their favor. The Mavs' next matchup was against the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder were the most talented young team in the Western Conference. They had a trio of Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. Nowitzki didn't want to hear about it. Disco Dirk danced his way to 48 points on 12 of 15 shooting while going 24 for 24 from the line in Game 1. His play was on a whole other level. The man who was once criticized for his lack of athleticism was showing off what hours upon hours of fundamental training looked like. He almost never missed, and he was shooting from everywhere. He was 7 feet tall, for goodness sakes. The Mavericks went on to cruise past the Thunder in 5 games to earn their place in the 2011 NBA Finals. To the surprise of no one, they got matched up against the Miami Heat. LeBron was closing in on his first ever championship. Miami was there to do what they were meant to do. The only thing standing in their way were the Mavericks. For Dallas, vengeance was within an arm's reach. This was their rematch against the same organization that shattered their dreams 5 years earlier. Game 1 was won by Miami. The Heat Big Three combined for 65 points in a 92-84 victory. It went the way it was supposed to go. Game 2 started out similarly. After a close first half, Dwayne Wade started to take the game over. It was reminiscent of 2006. With about 7 minutes left, Wade knocked down a three-pointer to open the lead to 15 points, 88-73. Rick Carlisle called a timeout. It looked like the series was already over. The Heat were too dominant. This was the beginning of what NBA fans should be expecting over the course of the next decade. Or so we thought. It was gut check time for the Mavericks. They showed off the desperation and unwillingness to surrender that made this team different from the teams in years past. In a true team effort, the Mavericks managed to tie the game up. The run was led by the Mavs' 2 longest tenured players, Jason Terry and Dirk. With the game tied and the clock running out, Dirk got the ball on the right side of the floor. He faked and drove to the rim with authority. He used every ounce of his strength and every inch of his reach to will the ball into the basket with 3 seconds left to win the game. The Heat fans were stunned. The series was going back to Dallas tied at 1. Game 3 looked similar. Nowitzki and Wade continued to trade baskets. Jason Kidd, Sean Marion, and Tyson Chandler were keeping the Mavs in the game with great defense, especially against LeBron. The score went back and forth as the two teams battled for supremacy. With the Heat up 2, Nowitzki waited until the last second to put up a 16-foot shot and missed. The series was 2-1 for the Heat. The news got worse for Dallas. Nowitzki showed up to Game 4 with a fever of 102 degrees. He was sick as a dog and pale as a ghost. The Mavericks looked at their superstar suffering. They knew that the responsibility was now on the role players to carry him, as he had done for them for so many weeks. With their backs against the wall and on the brink of elimination, the Mavericks battled their asses off to defend the legacy of their superstar. Sean Marion played one of the best defensive games of his life. He used his freakish wingspan to suffocate LeBron for the entire game. Mavs center Tyson Chandler dominated the interior with 16 rebounds, 9 on the offensive glass. It was a whole team effort. Dirk, in spite of his sickness, once again took over and closed the game out for the Mavericks. After they tied the series at 2, they never looked back. Game 5 was an offensive outburst that saw the Mavs score 112 points and win. Everything started clicking at once. Threes were falling down from everywhere. The Mavs played lockdown defense. LeBron had no answer. Game 6 was more of the same. Dallas outmatched the Heat in a heroic effort to win the series. They were simply the better team that year. Nowitzki won the Finals MVP, and the city of Dallas, after years of failure, could finally celebrate. A lot of people to this day take credit away from the Mavericks and talk about how LeBron choked. Anyone who truly understands basketball knows otherwise. The Mavs played that entire playoffs seamlessly. Their team defense was sensational, and Dirk put on a performance for the history books. The 2011 Mavericks were a true example of how teamwork, faith, and sacrifice can triumph star power. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and click subscribe for more great content.